Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So today we are here together for a series of webinars. But before we deep dive on the topic, I would like to present you that the World Agility Forum is a global program that highlights...
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So today we are here together.
I'm listening some feedback.
For a series of webinars.
Wait,
but
just listening some feedback. Sorry. Oh, good. So the World Agility Forum is a global program that highlights both individuals and organizations for their effort and commitment to initiatives in achieving agility. We applaud you for behaving and thinking differently to bring more value to our customers and being a game changer in this new and global and creative economy. The World Agility Forum created a series of webcasts as a call that will address these 6 dimensions. During the following months, we will have open discussions between industry business leaders and agile thought leaders about the real challenges of modern companies. Our discussions are idea labs where very different perspectives will be met. We want to bring clarity about the role of strategic and operational agility in business, to move from need to product quickly and to reinvent themselves in a relevant way of doing business. Who are suffering from perspective agility or this prescription? So transitions, some of them might not bring the value that you're looking for. That the inability and inertia to react to change are unable to reach the new markets and new customer segments. Existing markets are disappearing suddenly. So today, we will kick off this series of webinars with these 6 dimensions of change every company will face. And we will do that with our great friends, Evan Liborn and Steve Denning. Evan is very well known in the Agile community. He's the founder of Business Agility Institute, an amazing initiative for bringing agility to organizations, and especially struggling during this time. And Steve Denning, one of my mentors and a person that created all these initiatives of the World Agility Forum, is a well-known speaker and author that everybody knows. He's the author of The Age of Agile, The Leader's Guide to Radical Management, and senior contributor of Forbes. So based on Steve Denning's work and the document he wrote about why only the Agile will survive, business agility, which was already a major organizational trend in the last few years, has become an overriding priority at right now, what these times we are living. So these dimensions are health and safety, the mechanics of adapting, strategic opportunities and risks, internal upgrading business agility itself, and longer term implications. Where is this leading us? So we are promoting a webinar every month, and this is also a call for nominations. We have a nominations program. Right now it's open till July. We have a call for jury because we need then to evaluate the nominations we will receive. So we hope during the next following months, we'll create a huge community around these topics. And this is a call also to invite you and your organizations, everyone that loves this word we call Agile, and we bring them all to the 26th and 27th of September. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy this webinar, and I will pass the ball to Evan.
Good evening, everyone, or good morning, good day, good whatever it happens to be wherever you are. It's Melbourne, Australia, so it's definitely evening for me. You're not here to listen to me ramble on. I think we all know why we're here and who we're here to listen to, and that is definitely the esteemed Steve Denning. I just want to say a couple of quick words before I hand over to Steve to share his insights. As Hugo mentioned, this is a challenging time for everyone around the world. We are focusing both on the now, what are we going to do, how do we survive, how do we thrive, and we're looking to the future. How do we emerge from this crisis? How do we change? How do we become better than we were before? And what Steve has produced in his 6 dimensions is absolutely phenomenal and practical at the same time. You're going to have some questions throughout this, and I'll be answering your questions during the Q&A. So for those of you unfamiliar with Zoom, there is a Q&A button at the bottom. If you have questions, please type them throughout Steve's presentation. You can also vote on other people's questions. My job will be to go through and pick the questions that we'll try and get Steve to answer and share his insights. For those of you who are unaware, we were going to have a second speaker, Anna from Volvo, who unfortunately cannot make it today. So we get a double dose of Steve, which is only a good thing. I suppose on those words, Steve, would you like to kick us off? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Evan, and thanks, Hugo. I'm delighted to be with you here today. Good afternoon and good morning or good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is an unprecedented event that we're living through. The whole world is experiencing this massive shock, and there's massive personal, economic, and social damage. It's ended the lives of hundreds of thousands already, and it's upended the lives of all the rest of us. It's a paradoxical and unprecedented event. It goes to demand shock and a supply shock, and economic terms, it's creating a recession or a depression, maybe of unknown length and severity. It is inspiring heroic feats of collaboration and public spiritedness. It's also providing opportunities for crooks to peddle false cures and prey on the vulnerable. It's stoking competition between countries, but also collaboration between countries. It's exacerbated many disruptions that were already afoot and laid bare the unviability of many kinds of businesses. It's shown some truths which were thought to be self-evident, but actually untrue. It's put in question some of the most robust businesses on the planet and raising questions about principles that have guided management for decades. In short, change is afoot. It will lead to new ways of working, new ways of playing, new ways of learning, new ways of leading, new ways of living. Everything will be different. This is the mother of all disruptions. It's ushering in a new age. And it's proving to be a great accelerator. It's speeding up both negative and positive trends. And in this talk this morning, we'll be looking at both those sides, how to, in fact, move to the positive and avoid some of the negative. And as we look out across the world, you can see that the performance to date has been greatly variable. In the public sector, different governments and agencies have acted with different degrees of agility, and ranging from bureaucratic ineptitude to impressive quickness. And the results in terms of outcomes are startling. In Europe, Spain, UK, and Italy have more than 500 deaths per million, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, you see South Korea, which was right in the heart of the source of the crisis, has only 5 deaths per million, a difference of 100 times, 5 per million and a 500 per million, massive difference. So the impact of acting agilely is becoming stark and dramatic. in economic terms, the level of unemployment now is equivalent to what was in the Depression of the 1930s, and we don't know how long it will go on. The biggest impact probably in small businesses, which don't have the financial resources to survive these kind of shocks. Their situation is particularly important for the future because they are the generators, the most important generators of new ideas and new employment. And so if they were to fall by the wayside, then the effects on the economy would be even more devastating. And in the private sector, it was already seeing a major shift towards agility, and this has now become an overriding priority for firms. And I'm suggesting we talk about it in the 6 dimensions that Hugo laid out, then you can see on the slide. And we'll take questions which you can put in the Q&A section of the of Zoom. So get your questions ready, and we'll answer them in due course. But let me start with the first dimension, health and safety. And it's important to keep this in mind because a lot of the talk is about this is a business problem, but it's in origin a human tragedy. The lives of many human beings have been lost, and the livelihoods of many more have been drastically impacted. And in the absence of a vaccine or a treatment or a favorable mutation of the virus, these problems are going to be with us for some time to come. And dealing with the challenges of health and safety are key to resolving all the other issues. And we must keep this in mind at all times, that firms are now need to take the Hippocratic oath. They must pledge to do no harm in the way that they run their businesses, either for their customers or for the people doing the work. And they need to meet their responsibilities as good corporate citizens. Maintaining the primacy of delivering value to customer from safe workspaces must become the overriding dynamic of how they conduct themselves. And firms should do their utmost to enable people to work in a safe space and resume some version of their former lives. This is easier said than done, given the fact that the particular feature of this virus is that people with no symptoms are major transmitters of it. So even if one has no symptoms, one doesn't know that one has the disease, one may be spreading it to one's friends and relatives and workers and anyone that one comes in contact with. The challenge to create safe interaction with customers is tremendous. I'm particularly struck by the efforts of Atul Gawande, who is the manager and leader of a hospital system in New York, who has 75,000 workers who are on the front lines day by day dealing with and treating people with the virus. And yet, after several months, his whole system has had very few infections. And what he did to accomplish that, I think, has lessons for all of us. This was not some high-tech solution, some kind of vaccine or some special sort of equipment, that simple, practical things that any business, any firm, anyone involved in this could learn from. And we can come back to that maybe and talk about what exactly he did. And we'll put the link to his article in the New Yorker where he explains what he did in the chat box. The second dimension is the mechanics of adapting. When it became apparent that it would no longer be possible for most businesses to continue with their regular workplaces, many businesses shifted to working from home. And I think it was striking that firms that were in an agile mode of operation found this very much easier than firms that were not in an agile mode of operation. And when I looked into this, I read the number of books about working from home, which has been something underway for 20 years. And they read like books about Agile. They talk about you have to be working in small teams, you have to be working in short cycles, you need to be getting feedback as you go, and you need to have retrospective. Everything in the Agile world was already there in working from home. So it's not surprising that it's worked out much more easily from firms that were already Agile. And when we had a meeting of the Learning Consortium firms and said, well, how is it going? How is it actually operating? The consensus of all those firms was, it's better. Yes, there are problems with kids running around. Yes, there are distractions at home, but not having a 4-hour commute every day is one hell of a benefit. And if you have those 4 hours, you can spend a couple of hours with your kids and you're still 2 hours ahead. And study done by one of the firms showed that was in fact being much more productive than people working at home. So there are huge positives. And I think what we'll see is that firms will embrace working from home as a much more normal sort of practice. Already some firms have announced they will be doing this for the rest of the year. And other firms like Twitter have announced it will be permanent, that it will be a permanent option for their workforce. And this will have massive changes in how work is actually conducted as this plays out in the economy, because it will be, if it is possible to work more effectively from home for most people, then there will be huge economic financial pressures for all firms to do this. And if that happens, then firms will save money on the real estate that they don't need for offices. Offices will become a facility to look after things like recruitment and special events and interactions with customers, but the need for office space will be drastically reduced. And so the real estate market is likely to be drastically affected in a negative sense. And so these massive changes will play out. Exactly how and to what extent, but it seems certain that it will be a major part of it. Those firms that have to return to the office, the factories and customer-facing workspaces, they will now be facing the challenges that the health system has been facing. All of the challenges of having social distancing, having monitoring, having testing, having quarantining of people with symptoms. All of this will now affect all businesses, and they, in a sense, need to learn from the lessons which are emerging from the health sector. Moving on then to strategic opportunities and risks. There are huge risks and opportunities emerging from this. Obviously, there's a spectrum. Firms at one end, like Netflix and Riot Games and Clorox, are in an automatically much better position because of the social changes. At the other end of the spectrum, there are firms like bars and restaurants and hotels, which are almost by definition put out of business by the changes that are underway. And in the middle, a whole set of firms that are grappling with how this will affect their business. Some firms will have unexpected setbacks. I think real estate is one of those. Telemedicine and distance learning will accelerate dramatically. The need for doctors' offices and college campuses will be put in question. The whole nature of college education will be up for grabs. And we'll raise questions, why do we have a huge campus? Is it for running a football team, or is it for learning? Do we need to spend all that money on having a football team? Can we, in fact, make major savings? And is this an essential part of what education was all about? Is it about learning, or is it about socializing? And as businesses go online, some things which were done locally will now be done globally, because and the local benefits and the local peculiarities may succumb to the availability of things which were only available in specific locations in other parts of the world. At the same time, there'll be negatives, that issues of inequality are being aggravated. Some people can't work from home. They don't have a home to work from. They don't have computers, and support may be lacking. And so there'll be a need to deal with the negative aspects of these changes, but it will be massive, both in terms of the risks and the opportunities that will emerge. In terms of what I call the Agileisation of processes, what's emerging is that firms that have shifted from working in offices to working at home, is that there is almost an automatic descaling of processes. Processes are automatically simplified. And why do we need to have a big meeting to do this? We can actually do it on the fly, on the run. And so we're seeing that in a spontaneous way, processes are being redefined as we go. The risk, of course, is that when firms return to the office, it will be back to normal, and all of those slow-moving processes will be reinstated. The cost of them is astronomical. They sometimes have discussions in the Learning Consortium how much time is wasted on those processes, and it's somewhere between 20% and 70%, depending on the firm and depending on the analysis. But there's certainly a huge amount of waste. So taking advantage of this crisis to rethink those processes and simplify them and streamline them in the light of the experience. And the argument that it's not possible can be refuted by showing that, in fact, it was possible, it has been possible. So this is a forced experimentation. And as the Rahm Emanuel, the former White House Chief of Staff, said once, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And one hopes that this crisis will not go to waste. Moving on to the fifth dimension, agility from sideshow to main event. Just as the crisis is forcing businesses to reinvent itself, it's also an opportunity for Agile itself to reinvent itself. At a mundane level, things which were typically done in person, and the guides all talk about in-person meetings, can be and are being and have been redefined as virtual events. So all of the things like daily stand-ups and retrospectives can be and are being done in this fashion. But at a deeper level, the practices need to be redefined more often than they currently are, as not just creating agile teams, not just creating agile teams at scale, but creating agile enterprises. We need the processes, agile processes for making agile enterprises. And they build on agile teams, but they take agile to a new dimension. At the same time, there will need to be more emphasis on what I have called strategic agility. Much of the emphasis of Agile to date has been on improving existing products and services for existing customers. But what will be even more important in the future is the ability to create new businesses for new customers. This is where the huge gains that firms like Amazon are taking advantage of, and this has to become a much more central feature of the whole Agile movement than it has been to date. And most coaches are coaching operational agility, improving existing products and services. They have to expand their repertoire to cover creating new businesses. How do you create new businesses? The processes are similar and built on operational agility, but they are different and they need to be explored and learned. The even more important thing is to start looking at what is the actual scope of Agile. When we talk about Agile enterprises, are we talking about a set of firms that are Agile and a set of firms that are not Agile? When I was talking with Darryl Rigby, Bain consultant, who has a wonderful new book coming out later this month, Doing Agile Right, I was pressing him, and it turned out, as we discussed more and more, it was apparent that Agile was applicable to everything. There was nothing in the organization that one couldn't take advantage of and improve with an Agile mindset. The Agile mindset applies to everything. And if that's the case, why are we calling this thing Agile? In fact, what we're talking about is management. This is how an organization should be run. And let's call it management, and let's say that any firm that isn't implementing its work in this way is simply not managing properly, not managing in accordance with the 21st century. This is a shocking thought to some people, business schools. But I think this is what we're talking about when we're saying Agile needs to move from being a sideshow, some cute little thing that's being done on the side for software teams or a few special parts of the organization. This is the whole ballgame. This is the whole shebang. It's all about that. Finally, where is all this leading? There's a lot of talk about getting back to normal. What I think we should be talking about is, do we want to get back to normal? When we start to think, well, what is normal? I mean, is it normal that the world's foremost public health authority, CDC, can't implement the simplest kinds of measures needed to deal with a pandemic? Is it normal that the biggest and most sophisticated industrial country can't manufacture the most simple of medical equipment and supplies? Is it normal that government agencies don't have the systems in place to actually transfer money to businesses that need it? Is it normal that housing costs spiral as high as they are to become unaffordable? Can we redefine the whole way we live, given that people will be working from home a great deal more? Is it normal that an education system has infrastructure that doesn't seem at all related to learning? Is it normal that at a time of unparalleled technological innovation, organizations seem to be protecting the status quo instead of innovating for the future? In effect, our business schools, I know they're so addicted to the existing way of running things that we are simply missing out on massive, massive opportunities, and also failing to address things like global warming, inequality, crumbling infrastructure, a whole set of challenges that have not been met. Can we take advantage of this opportunity, this crisis, in effect, to rethink whether normal is good enough? Is it normal to make do with mediocrity? Can't we aim for better? In a sense, instead of getting back to normal, why don't we aspire to getting to better? So with this set of provocative thoughts, let me turn it over to Evan and how I've got this totally wrong.
You and I spoke about this earlier. So these 6 points, these six dimensions are ones that I think will give a lot of people and companies pause. And there's a lot behind them. To everyone out there, please add your questions to the Q&A. If you'd like me to attribute you, please sign that with your name so that I can sort of say who's asking the question. But as people are writing questions, and I can see a couple starting to come in, I do have one of my own, and it's, you touched on a key point. I was just writing some notes as you were talking, and you touched on a key point about sort of agility going from the sideshow to the main event. We have a lot of companies who are, let's call them already agile. Right? So they've got that strategic agility muscle memory. They've been practicing this for years. And in your article, you mentioned a few companies, Riot Games and so forth. You also obviously talk about the Frightful Five. Right? But these are companies who've got, who've been doing this for quite a long time. So when COVID-19 comes along, it's just another disruption. They know how to respond. So my question there is it too late? Right? For those companies who haven't started on this journey, for those companies who are just caught by surprise, should they start? Should they try and sort of be agile, or is it too late for them?
Never too late. Better late than never. I mean, as I've said for many times, this is about change or die. I mean, now the die part of it is becoming more obvious. Is there an alternative? I don't know any alternative. So my suggestion is learn quickly from what's been done before, avoid the mistakes that they've made, and make it happen.
Right. So you have nothing to lose but by trying, and everything to lose if you don't. I think that's very good. So one of our amazing guests has asked, can you give some examples of companies that are meeting the challenge of today and managing in an agile manner, and who's not, and some examples of who isn't working this way?
Well, I mean, if you start to say, well, which firms are succeeding in this very difficult environment, the most successful firms in the world are the frightful five. As Evan mentioned, the big tech, what are known as big tech companies, although they happen to be running five very different businesses, and they are the well-known, the usual suspects: Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Microsoft. And they, by and large, in their central dynamic, are being run in an agile fashion, and they are going from strength to strength. In the crisis, they are even more dominant in the stock market. They now represent 20% of the U.S. stock market. Two of those firms, Microsoft and Apple, are worth more than the entire stock market of the United Kingdom. They are also terribly flawed. They have terrible blemishes, and in some parts of their work they are not at all agile. In other parts they are running sweatshops. In other parts they are crushing the competition through questionable means, and some of those things will come and are already haunting them, or already troubling them. That's why they're called the frightful five. And if they don't deal with them, they will suffer. Of those five, I think Microsoft has been one that has largely avoided some of that, because it isn't as flawed and it doesn't have as many blemishes, and it also went through it was the frightful one 20 years ago.
This isn't your grandfather's Microsoft. It's in a previous life, I was an open source developer, and the thought of Microsoft would send shivers down any Linux developer's spine. But now Microsoft is an ally. They have reinvented themselves. They are a poster child of what it takes, or what is possible when an organization decides to change their culture and their personality. They're very good at that.
Very much so. I mean, they asked about those who are not performing. I mean, some of those who are not performing are those that are often held up as models for Agile. I mean, ING Bank, for instance, is talked about in Darrell Rigby's book, and pointed out that as a model of Agile, it has to be in question if it lost a huge portion of its market value over the last couple of years. If that's what Agile means, then there's something wrong with Agile. We need to be looking at Agile that not only is great workplaces for people, but also creates value for the firms and value for customers.
Yeah. So there's a number of questions coming through relating to remote working. And I'll try and group some of them together. So one of our attendees is asking, what can we as Agilists do to better promote remote work and support companies in remote work, and given there's such great opportunities to attract good talent? There's a similar question from Monica around what is going to be the impact on recruitment and how we are going to be attracting talent globally in the new reality that we are facing.
There's a whole literature on working virtually, working from home, and I was surprised how large the literature is. So any number of books. I'm going to be writing an article listing some of them shortly, and so sharing this information, which, as I say, there's a remarkable coincidence between what is in these books about working from home and what is in the books about Agile. They are basically saying the same thing. And so the message is, if you want to work from home, you need to be Agile. And if you want to be Agile, you might think about working from home.
No, I agree with that. In the Institute's library, we have a research paper on recruitment, Agile recruitment, specifically hiring for culture add versus culture fit. I'll share the link as well if people are interested in that research paper. To expand on that, another attendee is asking, besides Twitter, what companies have taken active measures to embrace notable work from home policies, and what makes them different or so special?
Well, I think many companies are working from home. I think it's something like at least 40% of the workforce. So many companies have done this. Some have done it more nimbly than others. Some have said, well, use your own computer, and if you don't have one, then they haven't allowed for that. Others have said, well, we'll supply you with computers. Still others have said, well, we'll give you a cheap computer, but it won't be able to do your regular work. And so that's been the problem. But Riot took this full step and said, look, you take your high-end computers with you. And all of the security issues that entailed, having these highly valuable equipment moved from the office to the home, they sorted that out. So many firms have coped with the practical aspects of it. It's hard to say that. As I say, the most exciting sort of example is, say, in the firms that have, like the hospital system in New York, that'll go one day, where they're able to actually work from office in the center of the crisis and still not suffer a significant level of infection with the disease.
One of the things that we've seen is there's a correlation between organizations with sort of high employee engagement scores, whether that's looking at Glassdoor stats or other engagement metrics, and how they've responded to work from home. A lot of companies have given employees it's like $200 or $1,000 to just buy what they need. I know I probably can't mention the company. I don't have permission to mention them, but a different games company to the one that you mentioned just gave everyone, they broke down their red tape for work from home and just made it really simple, really easy, and just said, everyone's got a budget. If you need more than that, go talk to your manager. And so, and again, this is a company that generally scores 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 for employee engagement, which is very, very high. So I want to shift away from working from home for a second. There's a really interesting question around how industries are changing. And John Francis is asking about airlines. And in a specific example, airline business models is based on cramming as many people into as few seats as possible. Obviously, well, as many seats as possible, I should say, because they're trying to maximize their revenue. How do you see industries such as airlines adapting in the next 6 to 12 months, given that, as you say, health and safety is going to be that #1 focus, and wearing masks isn't going to help you if the person 2 centimeters to your left is sick?
Well, this is one of the known unknowns, and how our customers are going to react in the first place to the prospect of sitting cheek by jowl with someone who maybe have a disease that will kill you. I mean, pending a vaccine or treatment. What will market? What will customers do? I think if you want a full solution to it, then again, Atul Gawande's experience is really quite important, because with a regular mask, there is no protection really against infection, because the virus is too small and it goes through the tiny gaps in a regular mask. But what's known as an N95 mask will protect you from the disease, and so that's what the hospitals staff have, N95 masks, which are sufficiently robust that you can sit next to someone with the disease, and so long as you wash your hands and you sterilize your mask after you've done it, you will not collect the disease. So he now has this experiment over 75,000 people, and so I think that's a fairly robust conclusion. So that would be one way in which it could happen, that you go on an airline but you use an N95 mask and you wash your hands and you are safe. But whether customers are going to believe that, whether customers are going to do that, that's one of the known unknowns about this. The other unknowns are how long this thing is going to last. Will there be partial treatments? Will there be semi-effective vaccines, and how that will affect, and how the airlines themselves will react. I mean, some of the airlines will go out of business. There will clearly be much less travel in the immediate future, and many of them which were in difficulties won't survive. And so no one knows how this is going to play out, but it's going to be different.
Virgin Australia has gone into bankruptcy. South African Airways has already collapsed. So it's, and I'll be honest, no amount of agility is going to help some of those organizations. It's that's beyond the pale and beyond any individual's ability to adapt. I'd also add that I think we as passengers or as customers are complicit in this. We've allowed airlines to we want to save the extra $100 on that economy class flight. So we have been buying tickets on flights that are making smaller and smaller seats, and it's that race to the bottom is something that as customers we are complicit in. And I suspect if we want to take our own health seriously, that is something that we need to look at as well, and we need to make some demands of the airlines, and those demands come with our wallets. We need to be willing to pay more for more space, bigger seats, or just for the seat beside you, if we're going to make some real impact on some of that. So another question that came in, where was it? Sorry. Elvira Molitor, I apologize if I pronounced your name wrong. She's a huge fan of yours. You spoke about, in your book, Age of Agile, you talk about going from operational agility to strategic agility, a topic that I'm very, very much excited about right now. And you focus very much on the firm, at the whole firm. Given what is happening now, Are you seeing this going beyond into a political or a societal dimension?
It's hard to say what's happening. There is obviously some things that are happening very dramatic in the short term. And then you'll have, I don't know how many firms are working on a vaccine and working in a very public fashion and in a very accelerated fashion and getting approvals to do things that wouldn't normally be approved. So you certainly see that. And you see real estate firms starting to think about, well, what on earth is going to happen to our market? How they are going to react, how they are going to respond isn't clear. We haven't yet seen how education systems will adjust. We haven't seen how health systems will adjust. So we are still in the early days. I mean, what we're trying to lay out is this needs to be thought through. It's not just how do we get through a 3-month crisis. This is about the mother of all disruptions. And most businesses are going to be fundamentally affected, and both in terms of opportunities and risks. And obviously some businesses like restaurants have by necessity moved to take out businesses which they weren't involved in before. But that's just almost like an operational change, that for restaurants to become a totally different kind of organization, completely with new customers and totally different products, that we're still in the early days, and I haven't seen a great deal of that, but I'd love to hear about examples.
I know, and government agility is a very deep and broad topic in itself. It covers everything from policy development to service delivery. I know there's a few examples out there of Washington State CIO department is using holacracy. You've got the city of San Jose creating budget games, which is like agile, like budget games, buy a feature. If people remember that from the Contenio. Basically the same approach, but for a city budget. So I think there is a lot out there happening, but at a systemic level, I've not seen it either. So, like you say, it is somewhat new. There's a couple of questions.
Let me just say on that. I mean, you take striking cases like South Korea, which through a very agile set of steps, even though it was right next door to the heart of the crisis, was dramatically, 100 times more effective than European countries. If you're not interested in 100 times greater effectiveness, I mean, you're not really awake. And so imbibing the lessons and digesting those lessons and saying it's not just because they were willing to trade on privacy and tread on privacy, they move with incredible agility. Now, they did have experience with viruses before, so they weren't starting from scratch. But other organizations like CDC, which obviously had access to all this experience, were acting in exactly the opposite fashion, and a level of ineptitude that is really staggering.
So I'm going to summarize. There's a couple of similar questions, and I'm going to summarize, for example, Ken and a few others in the Q&A. What makes this crisis different? We've had crises before. In the last 20 years, there's 9/11, global financial crisis, Arab Spring, half a dozen revolutions and currency crashes around the world. And I think in Ken's question, it's in 9/11, there was a huge setback to travel, and airlines struggled. But a year later, everything was back to normal. If you look at, and this is one of my questions that I was going to ask earlier. There's the talk about the recession, the shape of the curve. Is it V? Is it U? Is it W? Is it L? What makes in your opinion, what makes this crisis different to the other crises, or more impactful for our community, and in fact for agility, than prior crises?
Well, one part of it is that it is both a health crisis and an economic crisis. If it was one or the other, that would be one thing, having the two together. Put in other terms, it is both a supply shock and a demand shock. It both cuts the ability of the economy to produce stuff, and it cuts the demand for people to buy stuff. So if you're not producing and you're not buying, you have a crisis that is much worse than any of the previous crises. So it is unprecedented, and there are many known unknowns about what's going to happen, but there are many unknowns. There will be things that will emerge from this that we had no idea, that we didn't know. So fasten your safety belts.
I love it. We have way more questions than we have time for. I think we're going to need to wrap up and hand back to Hugo in a second. Did you have any final comments or thoughts you wanted to share with the audience before we hand back?
I think look at the opportunities. This is my real hope, is that we learn from the risk, we learn from the setbacks, but we take it as a huge opportunity for learning. And it's forcing experimentation in so many things where we needed to experiment, and which have been so obvious and staring us in the face for so long. Things like telemedicine, distance learning, working from home. Take advantage of this opportunity, and let's make a better world.
Absolutely. Hugo, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Evan. So I'd like to emphasize that Evan shared with all of you at the chat for some of the research is leading. Also, thank you to Steve and Evan to be here at the webinar. Also like to invite you all for our series of webinars we are just kicking off today. The next webinar will be on the 16th of June. It will be moderated by Michael Clarkin. Our guests will be Ahmed Sidki, Chris Himes, Brett Brota, VP of Cerner, and Jason Ortmeyer, VP of Mortensen. The topic will be mechanics of adapting, virtual work, health, and safety, our second dimension based on the work of Steve Denning. So this is a call to action. Also, if you believe that your company deserves a recognition related to the path to agility and all the work have done with internally with our employees and with the customers, please reach us by get your company nominated, or individuals or leadership be also nominated in the World Agility Awards that have place on the 6th, 26th, and 27th of September. Saying this, I would like to thank you all.
May I very quickly also, and if you're interested in helping be part of the selection, the call for jury for the World Agility Forum is open as well. Please, Hugo will share the link. Please nominate yourself, nominate somebody else with their permission. We are putting together a small team of thought leaders and experts, industry practitioners, to evaluate the nominations independently, unbiased, and I need your help. I'm not ashamed to ask for it. I definitely need your help in that. So please nominate yourself for the jury if you are interested. Sorry, Hugo.
Okay, no, that's all good. So I would like to close this webinar, but I would like to close with a hope that Steve wrote at the end of his article. So, and that was when Steve said, why not getting better instead of getting back to normal? Steve, just a final comment about that, if companies will have the energy to do that. Your thoughts before we close.
Yeah, let's get to better. I can't say more. It's I mean, it's such a huge opportunity, and there are enormously exciting things happening as well as the setbacks, and let's focus on the opportunities and the advances, and let's build on those and make a better world.
So here is the chance. Hopefully, Business Agility Institute, World Agility Forum, and other organizations that are collaborating with all of us, making an alliance of alliances, also to collaborate to make this world a little bit better. And this is our purpose, and that's what motivates us to keep working and doing these webinars to all of you. And hope this works as a little inspiration to have that energy to make the things a little bit better. Thank you so much. See you all in June 16th. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, everyone that attended this webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.